Imagine waking up one morning and every headline screams the same sentence. Trump just issued a fatal warning. It's not another tweet, not a campaign slogan. This time, it's a threat that echoes through the halls of Washington and across the globe. He's calling out Nigeria, accusing its leaders of allowing Christians to be slaughtered, and warns that if the violence doesn't stop, America will act, militarily if necessary. His words aren't wrapped in political politeness. They're raw, direct, and heavy with intent. If people are killed for their faith, Trump says, that's not a local issue. That's a war. And for a moment, the world stops. Some cheer him for finally saying what others wouldn't dare. Others panic, afraid that he's about to light another geopolitical fire. But no one can ignore it. Because for the first time in years, someone at the top isn't speaking like a diplomat. He's speaking like a man who's had enough of silence. While Trump's warning dominated the news, Obama walked onto a stage in Virginia and started joking. Laughs filled the room. The audience loved it. But outside that hall, the world was burning. Bombs in the Middle East, inflation hitting record highs, and a generation of Americans wondering why every promise of change ends up looking the same. And as Obama made fun of Trump, calling him a cartoon president, many couldn't help but notice the irony. Because lately, the real world looks more like a dark comedy than anything else. Trump and Obama, two names that couldn't be more different, yet forever tied in contrast. One speaks fire, the other poetry. One provokes fear, the other nostalgia. But both reveal something uncomfortable. The system is cracking, and no one really knows who's holding it together anymore. Trump's statement about Nigeria isn't just about religion or foreign policy. It's a reflection of something deeper, a shift in how America sees itself. He's saying what millions feel, that moral decay has replaced leadership, that compassion has become political theater. And maybe that's why his words hit so hard. Because even if people don't like him, they can't deny he's saying what many whisper but don't dare to shout. But here's the truth. This story isn't really about Trump or Obama. It's about us. Every time we scroll past injustice and say, it's not my problem, we become part of the silence he's talking about. Every time we trade truth for comfort, we let the system win. And maybe that's what Trump understands better than anyone. Fear keeps people quiet, and silence keeps power where it is. That's why his words cut through the noise. He's not begging for approval. He's exposing the illusion of control. The illusion that the system can fix itself. It can't, and the crowd knows it. The applause that once filled arenas now feels tired. The promises sound recycled. People aren't looking for saviors anymore. They're looking for honesty, even if it's brutal. That's why this moment matters. Because behind all the headlines and chaos, something bigger is happening. People are starting to question everything. They're starting to wake up. Trump's warning wasn't just to Nigeria. It was to everyone still pretending that silence is peace. Either you speak, he said, or your silence becomes your answer. Maybe that's the real message. The world doesn't change when politicians talk. It changes when ordinary people stop being afraid to see the truth. And maybe that's what scares the system most. Not Trump, not Obama, but you. Because once you start thinking, once you stop accepting the same old stories, no power on earth can silence you again. So stay tuned, because what's coming next isn't just politics. It's a test of who still believes in the truth, and who's content to live in the comfort of lies. The headlines haven't cooled, and neither has the tension. Trump's words keep echoing, not because of what he said, but because of what they mean. If people are killed for their faith, that's a war. It's the kind of line that splits the world in two, those who agree and those who pretend not to hear. But while the media keeps spinning their narratives, something else is happening in silence. People are starting to pay attention. In living rooms, in coffee shops, in online forums, everyone's asking the same question. What if he's right? What if the real threat isn't the chaos abroad, but the corruption within? Trump knows how the game works. He's been inside it, burned by it, rebuilt from it. That's why when he speaks, even his enemies listen. Not because they respect him, but because they fear the mirror he holds up. His message about Nigeria isn't just about religion. It's about accountability, about calling out the hypocrisy of leaders who preach human rights abroad, but can't protect them at home. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because when you expose hypocrisy, you threaten the foundation of every comfortable lie. Meanwhile, Obama keeps smiling, his charm still intact, his words still perfectly measured. He says, America needs unity, hope, decency. And he's right. But people don't want poetry anymore. They want proof. They've heard the slogans, they've seen the hashtags, they've watched the same cycles of outrage and forgiveness repeat until the truth lost its meaning. So when Trump breaks through that polished surface and says the quiet part out loud, people react. Not because they love him, but because they're tired of pretending. This isn't about red versus blue anymore. It's about truth versus illusion. The illusion that everything's fine, that the adults are back in charge, that America can fix the world while it's falling apart inside. Look around. Grocery prices are rising. Cities are tense. Trust is collapsing. The people feel it, even if politicians don't. That's why Trump's warning feels different this time. It's not just a political speech. It's a signal flare in a storm. He's saying what the system won't admit, that moral collapse is more dangerous than any foreign enemy. And maybe that's why Obama's jokes fall flat now. The laughter sounds forced, the optimism outdated. It's not 2008 anymore. The world has changed, and people have changed with it. The new generation doesn't want to be entertained. They want to be heard. They've grown up watching lies dressed as leadership, watching power disguise itself as progress. They've seen wars justified by peace, censorship defended as safety, division marketed as democracy, and somewhere along the way, they stopped believing. That's what scares Washington the most. Not Trump's speeches, not his anger, not his defiance, but the awakening he represents. Because when people start realizing they've been controlled through comfort, they stop playing by the rules. They start thinking for themselves. That's when power begins to crumble. Trump, whether you love him or hate him, has become a symbol of that discomfort. A loud, imperfect reminder that silence serves the powerful, not the people. And every time he speaks, even his enemies give him more strength by reacting. He thrives on their outrage, and they can't help but feed it. But here's the deeper truth. Trump's warning isn't about a single country or religion. It's about a world that's losing its moral compass. A world where leaders perform compassion while citizens suffer. Where peace is a brand, not a principle. And when someone finally calls it out, the system labels him dangerous. But maybe that's what the world needs right now. Danger. Not chaos, but courage. The courage to ask questions, to see through propaganda, to realize that sometimes the loudest man in the room is the only one telling the uncomfortable truth. So when Trump says, "Speak or your silence becomes your answer," maybe that's not a threat. Maybe it's a challenge. Because history doesn't remember those who waited. It remembers those who spoke, even when their voices shook. And right now, in a world drowning in noise, that kind of voice might be the only thing that can still wake us up. The media tried to bury Trump's warning under a mountain of analysis, opinion pieces, and late-night jokes. But something feels different this time. The story didn't fade like it usually does. Instead, it spread. Not through official headlines, but through whispers, through conversations that weren't supposed to happen. People are no longer trusting the screens that tell them what to believe. They're talking to each other again, sharing videos, questioning the timing, wondering why the same politicians who preach tolerance are silent about actual persecution. For years, silence has been the system's greatest weapon. Keep people busy, keep them entertained, keep them arguing about distractions. But Trump broke that rhythm. His statement about Nigeria wasn't just a political comment. It was a strike at the moral double standard that governs the modern world. He didn't use fancy diplomacy. He used raw truth. If you kill people for their faith, don't expect our money. Simple, brutal, effective. And while Washington gasped, ordinary people nodded. Because finally, someone said what they had been thinking all along, that the world's so-called leaders have grown too comfortable playing savior while ignoring the real evil. But then came the backlash. The pundits called him reckless. The journalists called it fear-mongering. Even some of his allies distanced themselves. Yet, the more they attacked, the more people paid attention. Because the louder the establishment panics, the closer you know someone is to the truth. And that's the paradox of Trump. He's chaos and clarity in one. His delivery might be loud, his tone may offend, but beneath it all lies a message that cuts deeper than politics. The world is run by cowards who mistake silence for virtue. Meanwhile, Obama, the ever-polished orator, continued his tour of smiles and nostalgia. He joked about Trump's fatal warning, called it typical drama, and got standing ovations. But outside that polished theater, something darker brews. America feels different, colder, more tired. People don't laugh like they used to. They scroll in silence, watch prices rise, watch jobs disappear, and wonder when hope and change became cope and survive. Obama's charm reminds them of what once felt possible. Trump's bluntness reminds them of what's real. Together, they form a strange mirror, one showing the dream, the other showing the decay. And in between those two images, people are waking up. Because this isn't just about two men. It's about the illusion collapsing. The illusion that democracy still belongs to the people, that elections change anything, that the same system that feeds you lies will one day free you. Trump, knowingly or not, ripped open that curtain again. When he warned about Nigeria, he wasn't just addressing Africa. He was holding up a global mirror, a mirror that shows how Western governments profit from instability, how moral outrage is a marketing tool, and how the world's power structure thrives on chaos, as long as it's controlled. But now, control is slipping. People are starting to connect dots. Why are the same leaders who condemn hate abroad funding division at home? Why do wars always create billionaires? Why does every promise of peace come with new weapons deals? Those questions are spreading faster than any official statement can contain. And that's what terrifies the establishment. Not Trump's words, but the thoughts they ignite. Because once people start asking why, propaganda loses its power. You can't unsee corruption once you've seen it. And Trump, intentionally or not, made millions look directly at it. The system can mock him, censor him, or call him dangerous, but the damage is already done. The illusion is cracked. The empire of politeness, diplomacy, and carefully crafted lies is showing its seams. And deep down, people are realizing that change won't come from polished speeches or carefully worded statements. It will come from disruption, from discomfort, from truth spoken without fear of consequences. That's what this moment represents. It's not about politics anymore. It's about survival. Not of a party, but of honesty itself. Because a world that punishes truth and rewards deception is already dying. Trump just said it out loud. And now, whether the media likes it or not, millions are listening. In the days that followed, the tension didn't fade, it thickened. Trump's words about Nigeria turned from a headline into a movement, and that's what no one in Washington expected. Because what started as a controversial statement had now become a spark for something deeper. People questioning why they've been told for so long that silence equals peace. It wasn't just about religion, or Africa, or foreign policy anymore. It was about truth. It was about how easily truth gets buried under bureaucracy, fear, and money. Trump didn't just call out violence, he called out hypocrisy. He pointed at the institutions that speak of freedom while quietly funding those who destroy it. And while politicians scrambled to distance themselves, ordinary people started asking, who else is lying to us? That's the nightmare scenario for every establishment. Not rebellion, but awareness. Once people begin to see through the illusion, control starts slipping away. On the surface, the government pretended to stay calm. Spokespersons gave polished answers, news anchors smiled through their fear, and social media platforms began fact-checking anything that resembled Trump's statement. But the more they censored, the louder it grew. You can't suppress something that speaks to people's instincts. They might not understand politics, but they understand dishonesty when they see it. They can feel when someone's lying. And for once, they were hearing someone who said what no one else dared to. That morality without action is meaningless, and silence is complicity. While the establishment argued semantics, something powerful was happening online. Hashtags turned into discussions. Discussions turned into anger, and anger turned into clarity. People began connecting this situation with their own. Corruption in their countries, lies in their media, betrayal by their leaders. It wasn't just about America anymore. It was global. From Europe to Africa to Asia, people started repeating Trump's words. If people are killed for their faith, that's a war. It resonated, not because of the politics behind it, but because it spoke to the soul. It stripped away the pretense of diplomacy and called out evil for what it was. The world hasn't heard that kind of bluntness in decades. Meanwhile, Obama's response kept the old political rhythm alive, elegant, calm, and safe. But the contrast between his calm humor and Trump's fury was too big to ignore. It symbolized the split in the modern world. One side still clinging to polite lies, the other embracing uncomfortable truth. People were no longer looking for peace that required silence. They wanted honesty, even if it came wrapped in fire. Trump understood that in this new era, being polite means being powerless. The people didn't need another speech. They needed someone willing to say what others wouldn't. And that's exactly what he did. His critics called it reckless, but to millions, it felt like relief. Because deep down, they were tired of being told to wait, to hope, to trust. They've been doing that for years, and nothing changed. Now someone was finally saying, enough. That's why his message hit harder than anyone expected. It wasn't just political, it was spiritual. It was about reclaiming something that's been stolen, the courage to speak. Every time Trump defied the script, he reminded people that they weren't powerless. That's why, despite every scandal, every headline, and every attempt to destroy his image, his influence wouldn't fade. Because people didn't just believe in him. They believed in what his defiance represented. The system's reaction proved him right. The media's outrage, the politicians' fear, the censorship. It all exposed the truth he was talking about. They didn't fear chaos. They feared awakening. The moment people stop obeying narratives, the system starts to break. That's what's happening now. Across the world, citizens are waking up, realizing that their voices matter more than they were told. The fear is fading, replaced by something more dangerous: clarity. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Trump's fatal warning wasn't a threat to the world. It was a threat to the machine that's been running it. And maybe that's why the establishment is terrified. Because when people start thinking for themselves, their power starts to end. History has a strange way of circling back to the same question. Who really runs the world? The leaders we see, or the systems we don't? Trump's warning has turned into more than a political statement. It's become a symbol of defiance, a crack in the illusion that's been carefully painted over for decades. Governments are still talking about stability. Economists are still promising growth, and diplomats are still calling for patience. But the people are no longer listening. They've heard those words before, and they know what they mean. More waiting, more lies, more control. Trump's words hit differently because they didn't sound like policy. They sounded like truth. He didn't ask for permission to speak. He didn't wait for approval. He just said it. And that's what broke the spell. When he said, If you kill people for their faith, that's a war. It wasn't just about Nigeria. It was about every silent deal, every hidden agenda, every politician who looks away when it's inconvenient. It was a mirror held up to the world, and no one likes what they see. But maybe that's the point, because the truth isn't supposed to comfort you. It's supposed to wake you up. And that's exactly what's happening. The media's strategy to silence him has backfired. Every attempt to discredit him only amplifies his message. Every label, dangerous, divisive, unhinged, only proves his point, that the system fears those who refuse to bow to it. Even his critics have become part of the story. They react, they debate, they dissect, but they can't ignore him. And that's how the cycle turns. Because Trump's greatest weapon isn't his voice. It's the reflection it forces people to confront within themselves. He's not telling them what to think. He's reminding them that they can. Meanwhile, Obama continues to speak the language of diplomacy, polished, elegant, and empty. He tells the crowd to trust in the process, but that process is exactly what people no longer believe in. They've seen too many promises end in betrayal. Too many elections change nothing. The people who once believed the system would fix itself now realize it was never designed to. And maybe that's what Trump's fatal warning was really about. Not Nigeria, not faith, not politics, but control. Control over minds, over narratives, over truth. The kind of control that convinces you you're free while quietly deciding everything for you. And now, the illusion is cracking. You can feel it in every protest, every movement, every silence that turns into a question. The people aren't angry for no reason. They're angry because they've been awake too long to keep pretending. They've realized that freedom isn't given, it's taken. And once you understand that, there's no going back. The system thrives on your silence, but silence is breaking everywhere. Across the world, citizens are reclaiming their voices, one truth at a time. They're not waiting for leaders anymore. They're becoming their own. Trump's name might fade one day, but the wave he triggered won't. Because this isn't about him anymore. It's about everyone who's ever felt unheard, lied to, or silenced. It's about realizing that the real revolution doesn't start with a vote. It starts with a thought. And that thought spreads, quietly at first, then loudly, until it becomes unstoppable. That's what the establishment fears most. Not chaos, not rebellion, but consciousness. The moment people start thinking freely, they stop obeying blindly. That's why this story doesn't end here. Because the more they try to control it, the more it grows. The warning Trump gave might have been political, but the message behind it is universal. Speak before you're silenced. Think before you're told what to believe. Act before it's too late. The choice isn't between left or right anymore. It's between truth and comfort. Between waking up or staying asleep. Between being ruled or being free. So now, it's no longer Trump's move. It's yours. Because every generation reaches a point where it must decide whether to follow the rules or rewrite them. And maybe, just maybe, that moment is now. History is watching. The question is, who will write it this time? The politicians, the media, or the people who finally stopped believing in the lie? You decide. Because silence has built the system, but your voice can break it. And maybe that's the real warning. Not from Trump, but from time itself. So, what will you choose? Speak or stay silent?